Hello and welcome to episode 54 of the Foam News Collective podcast. I'm KT. I'm here with the whole crew. Grims, Vile, what's going on?
Yo.
Not much. Just working.
Yeah.
Working on stuff.
That's how it be. We're really excited to chat with our special guest today, better known as Blasterface, but our new friend that we're making, Chris, here. Thank you so much for coming on. We're excited to talk history, talk about your career. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Long day.
Yes. I get that. Okay, so I got a couple things I got to tell our audience about real quick before we get into the exciting stuff. First up, many of you listeners and viewers, as I look at my camera, which I never do, may have noticed that this last week and this current week, the podcast episodes were on off weeks. This is not a permanent change. It just has so happened that due to varying scheduling things, this time it was just about me being completely overwhelmed last week. I had a theater show close and then another one starting up, and it was just like putting the episode together is going to be enough, and thankfully Chris was willing to shift by a week, which I'm super thankful for. We probably will be keeping this in our tool belt, the idea of scheduling the podcast on the off week. So you may see this happen every now and then, but it is not a permanent change. A lot of our podcast episodes will be having some great guests on, specifically timed around events that they're involved in coming up, for example. So we will not be delaying those. But you can expect us to do that every now and then. The other thing that I'm really, really excited to announce, Jake747, who has been helping us with Chinese localization of the show for a number of months, uploading the show to Bilibili in native quality and making Chinese captions that we put both on the original episodes and on that version, is in touch with the head boss at Worker and has offered an opportunity for us and for our viewers and listeners to ask some questions of him. We are going to have a link to a Google Doc, a Google form in the description of this that you can click on if you have a question you want to submit. No questions are guaranteed to get through. We are going to go through and edit and send a final list of questions to him. But if you have something you have always wanted to know about Worker, because Worker is generally not super communicative of a company, now might be your chance. So please feel free to fill out that form, throw some questions at us, and we'll do our best to get that out there. Check the link in the description. That all being said, Blasterface, hey, would you just start to give us some backstory? Tell us about your time in the industry. A lot of people know you as someone who knows a lot of things about the company side of foam flinging and has a lot of history. But how'd you get started in the industry? How long have you been doing this? What companies have you worked for?
Well, the real short story is, I guess, early 2000s. 2004, 2005, I was working at a consulting company that was started by an ex-Hasbro guy, and Hasbro was still a client. So there's a lot of toy stuff happening, and occasionally I got to work on toy stuff, but it was kind of rough. You know, the toy projects asked for a lot and didn't have a huge budget. But I did work on some early 2000s stuff, but I was a little more around it than I was directly working on it, with a couple exceptions.
Okay.
And then from
anything
there,
you can name that'll get the listeners hyped.
Let me look at my list. Well, this is embarrassing, but I think the first thing that I technically worked on and did anything on, and it wasn't like I was a junior engineer, and it was like my first kind of, I don't want to say my first real job, but I was there for 11 years, so it was like my first real long stint somewhere. And it wasn't my entire project, but I did work on the Oozinator, and specifically the nozzle.
Vile goes scurrying.
Yeah.
You just had to say it. It was literally right next to me. I have two of them.
I worked on the nozzle. It was kind of bop around the office a little bit, and it has some weird stuff going on. It has like two different chemicals that mix, and weird cartridges and stuff. And the thing that was really, I guess, sort of the problem was the nozzle would get clogged if you mixed inside, any of the plumbing or too close. So it was sort of like, how do you mix right at the tip or just outside? And a zillion things were tried. I remember some design that used a whole bunch of hypotubes, which is like what a hypodermic needle's made out of, but all stacked together.
Oh, interesting.
And
how many hands does something like this go through at a company like that?
It depends. I mean, what we were tossed was sort of a functional prototype challenge, and so they were drawing things, and I think the layout didn't change very much in terms of the basic, where everything was. Mm-hmm. But we had to make a thing, a slab-sided polycarbonate. You can see all the guts, and but it's got to do all the functions, but not necessarily. It's got to sort of fit the outline, but it's sort of more of a two-dimensional prototype in a certain sense. But it's sort of like, well, where are the, since this was something that they had never done. So, if you just want to make a super soaker and there's some very modest update or change, or you can really just sort of reskin something that exists, then that gets tossed to a factory and, you never would see it. Right. But when the factory can't do something, or they're scratching their head, or, someone looks at it and says, wow, this is going to be hard to do, or, the internal team doesn't have either the bandwidth to do it, and or sometimes Hasbro would try a couple times internally, and then it would be like, well, let's toss it outside and see what they can do. So there's a bunch of reasons that you might go outside the company for something, especially once you have a track record for being fast and doing clever stuff. Okay. But kind of one person, I guess, is kind of your answer typically. Everyone loves to brainstorm and help out a little bit, but
there's one person who's the central funnel.
Yeah,
for a design like that?
At this particular company, there's the boss who, would have, written the proposal and sort of gotten the job or whatever, and might have done some thinking or some structuring of the project and said, hey, I think we should take this approach, or I want you to explore this. And then it's kind of tossed to someone who okay, it's that guy's mission to, hand in, a complete engineering prototype that's done. And to a certain extent, if sometimes you just hit a brick wall, projects do get kind of tossed from person to person. That's usually a bad sign when that happens. It's
doomed for something. So I mean, early 2000s.
Collaboration is something I don't have a very positive opinion of, and a lot of times the most successful projects, they have input at there's collaboration at the level of brainstorming or explaining your problems, or sketching or talking to people, but it's kind of on one person to actually execute, and the 7 people trying to solve 1 or 2 or 3 problems is usually a disaster.
Well, so I'm really curious about how this might have changed, because this is early 2000s. You're working for this consulting company. You're doing a lot of stuff for Hasbro, and at the time, it seems like a relatively big kind of setup. I'm thinking about we had Adam of Band Blasters on recently, and then some of the situation he's in right now. He's kind of the sole mechanical internals designer for a whole line of stuff, and I wonder how much that process has changed over the years. So maybe we can get through more of your history, because you're doing this for how long?
11
years. You said 11 years.
And there was a couple other things. There was some Super Soaker stuff, but it was more being done around me. I didn't get. I usually got put on the big corporate projects with the bigger budgets, and I didn't get to play stuff. But I had a little bit of a hand in the original drum magazine and in the double drum.
Oh, okay.
But what happens is one of the guys that's working there, who was a contractor, basically spins out his own company and takes an idea that he kind of developed and sort of licenses it. Basically, he stops working on the clock and he gets into the royalty game. And that's the guy that founded Kite and Rocket Research. So he kind of peels off. And what launched him off was the drum magazine. That was the, around 2000, end of 2007, beginning of 2008 was sort of that period. And then it was the Raider was the product. A lot of times when you work on this stuff, you work on a core technology or a way of doing something, and then sometimes there's one product if you're lucky, or there's, if you're really lucky, there's 12 products, but you lose track of wait, do we do, is that, but there's the Raider, but then it turned into this, it turned into that, it turned into the Rampage.
Right.
But they don't necessarily come back to you once you've solved the initial problem, and they just sort of reskin it and rejigger it. You're out.
Yeah.
So what happened was I kind of, hit a bit of a wall at this consulting company. It's a small company. It's not, it's not like working at Google. There's sort of limited room for advancement. So I actually went to go work for Robert at Kite and Rocket, and then my life was Nerf. Like,
Oh, okay.
For
So what kind of
week.
stuff? What kind of stuff did Kite and Rocket get involved in?
So Kite, even before working for him full time, I would sometimes come on weekends or like late nights, or sometimes he would even actually hire me from the consulting company.
Oh, okay.
So I had a little bit of a hand on it. I worked on the Dude Perfect bow. I did a lot of work on the arrow, and factory threw out about half of it. And a lot of stuff that didn't quite make it. Worked a little bit on Vortex prototypes when that was being developed. Just a lot of stuff that didn't make it, unfortunately. And then in 2015 is when I came to work for him full time. And then I would say, again, a lot of stuff that did not make it, unfortunately. But in terms of what did,
Well, I mean, to what degree too? Like, if you're working on these things, it's still part of the process, right? Because like the company is, you have this contract or you have this series of contracts, and then maybe you make a product and that product doesn't work out. But I would suspect that it would go into
a weird animal. Kite and Rocket had a very weird business model. It was a very tough business model. It was very tough to make it work, but we were making it work. So the business model is slightly insane. It's basically completely on spec. It is effectively a small business subsidizing the R&D of a $6 billion a year corporation. It's 3, 4, 5 guys.
So you're just designing things in a vacuum, and then you are trying to sell them.
Well, okay, so that's another unusual thing about the process is that the toy industry is famously open to inventors. I mean, they'll talk to any crazy person off the street, pretty much. They're like the opposite of Apple. Apple, if you send them a sketch, Apple will burn it, incinerate it. They don't want the lawsuit claiming that you invented something.
Yeah.
Look, I drew a square. I invented the iPhone. So there's a front door process. There's literally like a pad. Like you go into a conference room and there's like a yellow pad with a form on it, and it's like, what's the thing? All these categories and things to check. And now it's a little more digital. There's an online portal called Hasbro Blast, and you can if they take your idea, you end up with essentially a royalty contract, and so that's typically they pay in advance at some point, and then they give you a certain percentage royalty, and that's kind of a weird. That's not what Kite and Rocket does. That's kind of a weird business. Inventors are a little goofy. They tend to be sort of one-man operations, and they have to show 20, 30, 40 things for 1 or 2 to hit. So they can't really do a heavy amount of development and figure stuff out and build a full prototype. So they're a little showman. There's smoke and mirrors and duct tape and bubble gum and don't look what's under the table. Kite and Rocket is like the opposite. It's like aerospace skunk works. Hey, that thing you thought was impossible, here it is, we did it, by the way. It's already done. And so Hasbro kind of comes in the back, or not Hasbro, Kite and Rocket comes in the back door and has more of a relationship. Like we didn't really fit into a bucket, which caused problems sometimes, but because we came in the back door, we talked more directly with engineers and designers, especially, about what they were working on, what they were thinking, what they tried and didn't work, and where they were going. So like if you are just as a random toy inventor coming off the street and are like, hey, I got a baby, and it walks and it talks and it does cartwheels or something, and they're like, cool product, cool toy, nice demo, but we're just getting away from the baby thing. We're looking for we're trying to get into digital content or something, and the babies are last century. So great product, but we pass. Whereas if you kind of talk to them and hear what their wishes and dreams are, hey, if someone could come up with a bow that was like really big but could be drawn, had a full size arrow but could be drawn by like a 7-year-old girl and shot 100 feet and was accurate enough to hit a salad plate at that distance, that would be cool. We would sell the crap out of that. And then we were like, So the hit rate was a lot higher. It was probably maybe roughly 50%. You know?
wow.
And so that could kind of justify like going much harder and more aggressively into a development place and building prototypes that were just, you know, we just showed up with the thing and here it is, and it's, you know.
Was that a quality of like the specific combination of people that you had there? You think was that like sort of a like very specific moment in time that made that possible?
Well, I think it was a philosophical position that the owner of the company had, but also was the way the company was sort of bootstrapped, which was it was a little bit of a weird thing because you know, Robert started out working as a consultant, you know, under this consulting company, and it was just work for hire. You know, you spend 25 hours, you bill for 25 hours. Here's the invoice. You know, you don't have any intellectual property. We don't give you a royalty. You know, see ya. You're just paid for your time. And there was something about that Robert really detested, and so he always had a desire to, I guess, get paid while he slept. And he succeeded.
I mean, who doesn't? Who doesn't? Twitch streamers do it all the time.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a hard move to make because when you have a relationship with a company like that and you're providing a service to them, you know, and you are this guy, they don't necessarily like you to switch your category. So it's like, you know, if the company you hire to do, to wax and polish your floors starts trying to offer you liability insurance or like wants to, sell you a used car or something, it gets weird.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, no, you're the floor guy. You're not our insurance. We have an entire department handling that, you know.
Do you think is there any sense either for you or maybe this is part of his thing to it, but it's like I know that for me when I make something creative, even if it's a paid thing, I would like to have my name attached to it in some way. And
yeah, being contractors, being very anonymous and just sort of a mercenary or a grunt, you know, you might have done the mission, but you never get the credit.
I mean, do you ever feel that way about stuff that you've had your hands in?
I'm not that fussy about it, to be honest. It's nice, but you know, it doesn't really bug me that much. I'm okay being kind of a behind the scenes guy.
Yeah.
You know, the important thing to me is like if I'm working with a group of people that you know, that obviously that like you're respected or valued based on what your capabilities are, and you have a reputation in the group, but like, you know, like whether a wider audience or whether my, you know, third cousins know about it or people on the internet or something, I don't really care.
Yeah.
If you can choose between fame and money, take the money.
Right.
Yeah.
Bill Murray said that.
Okay, so 11. What, Grim?
Oh, I was just going to say, I had the Facebook for the company pulled up, and they still have their photo of. It's a really small
I'm to the
space,
left with my back, and I'm working on the double drum on the screen cap, which is I think a violation of our NDA.
Yeah, it's like just public on the Facebook page. There's a pile of Nerf blasters in the corner.
Amazing.
There's the founder working with like this plastic, trying to work on an engineering sample. Someone's working on a Prometheus. You're on the computer working on the double drum. There's a blaster somewhere off on the right that never made it to release, and it's like a cardboard image of it, what it looks like. And then there's like two people at computers or whatever. And it's just
if you know where to look, there's been a lot of leaks actually, I think, out of
yeah, like
if you know where to look.
We were just talking about that actually before the podcast started. I was talking about that with Vile.
Yeah.
There are some interesting videos that have come out of Kite and Rocket, but it definitely fits the Skunkworks description.
And also the kiteandrocket.com.
Yeah, their website has a lot of videos.
Office, but
yeah, the videos seem to disclose a little bit, and it's kind of surprising that it's just kind of like, wow, that's interesting. Yeah. You know, if you look in the back over there, that's what's that little thing? And it's kind of because they're looking at like some bubble thing or whatever. You know, oh, these are bubbles that are lighting on fire, and it's like, but what's that thing over there? That's what I'm interested in. You know,
or you look at a video and you're like, oh, they're doing some challenge thing. Oh wait, that's Nerf Pro Half Darts Pro AccuStrike in 2020 on YouTube out in the public.
That's right.
Yeah, that was a thing you could have noticed in I think 2000. or late 2020, early 2021, I think.
Yeah, it was May 2020. I had just watched the video earlier today. I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that because I had remembered the video existed, so I went back to go look for it. I was like, yep, that's just out in the open web.
Well, because the production cycle for this stuff, this is one of the things we're always trying to, I guess, get people more aware of. The production cycles for these things can be pretty long.
Frustratingly long, and that's one of the things Hasbro is always trying to work on. Full disclosure, like I'll tell you my bias. I loved working with Hasbro. They're a big company and they have big company problems, and it's fun to Monday morning quarterback stuff. But the people I worked with were engineers and designers, and they really did love the product. And I'm sure there's people inside Hasbro, like any big company, that they're like, it's not really their dream job, and they're just there going through the motions. But the Nerf team was not like that. The people, everyone really, really loved Nerf and was really good at what they did. And, everyone, has their own gripes about, well, corporate decided to X that line, or, that never came out, or et cetera, et cetera. But I do have warm fuzzies for Hasbro, but I know a lot of the community is, exasperated with, product decisions or business decisions or, any number of things. And I'm not saying that those aren't like valid criticisms, because it's a relatively large company. And it has big company issues like any big company, and exactly where it's really tough being a diversified toy company. It's a lot easier to be a Dart Zone or a Busby in some ways, because Hasbro, they have to look at where they're going to get the best returns on their capital, and is it going to make more money to make another Transformers movie, or should we come out with a line of 6 Nerf products? Right. And the Transformers movie might be more money.
Right.
And they all the lines and all the different kind of customers they have, they're very, very, very diversified, which can make them feel like they're kind of going every which way, and they kind of are. They they make stuff from Monopoly to like they're building a giant game development studio in Austin, Archetype. So they've got their fingers everywhere. They're like an octopus. They have octopus problems.
Octopus problems.
Yeah.
Well, so 11 years at this consulting company, and then how long at Kite and Rocket?
Oh, let's see.
Because we're in like
5 years.
We're in like 2015, so then we're almost up to
2015 to COVID, basically.
2020. Okay.
Yeah.
So
there's a long story about that. These small companies can get weird sometimes.
Yeah.
Single owner, and especially if you end up with too much money.
Right. Cultures change and shift.
Yeah, people change, cultures change. COVID was a good time to take a break. I'm happy to tell any number of stories, but I guess just to give a little bit of a flavor of it is that because I had been friends with the owner and, really wanted to do my best, but also it was really fun to do the work. And also the office and the work and the company, everything was structured. It was, very devious. It's like Google. They do your dry cleaning, so you don't leave. And you have a takeout, free takeout, so you don't leave,
Right.
And so it was very easy to work very long hours. It was a lot of fun too. And so there was a decent stretch there where 100-hour weeks were like the norm. We had a fold-out cot for sleeping in the office. And
it's like video game development now.
Yeah. Well, it was sort of like what you read about, like with Apple, where people are asleep at their desks, and ultimately it's not very healthy in the long run. It's when you're younger and you can kind of do it and you have the passion for it. Yeah.
I'm sitting here as if I can judge. I work in theater, so that's like the mode of operation. But yeah, I get that. It's
work till you drop, basically.
Yeah. Jeez.
But it was a lot of fun, but it wasn't sustainable, like long term. We did a lot of good work there, and it was a crazy time period in terms of the lifestyle. I mean, I had people I knew that they thought I was dead. Like my car stopped working, because I didn't, I took the train to work, so I was back and forth,
right.
and like my car's dead.
Oh my God.
Like my parents didn't come visit for like 2 or 3, it was maybe like 2 years, because I was just too busy. We did some great work though, but
at what cost?
Well, I mean, every job you're at, most people are not at jobs for, their entire, I got one job and then I retired from there. So, they follow an arc,
Yeah.
And so, I rebalanced at some point, but it was a nice place to work. I was living north of New York City, out of the hubbub in a small village on the Hudson River. But I took the train in every day to Grand Central. It was a very nice commute. The office was Midtown Manhattan, which is a very, very unusual place to do toy development. There was unusual...
Expensive, too.
Not as expensive as you would think. We were kind of in a weird... we were like Mavericks. Like, we found a weird niche. Like, we weren't in, like, Class A or B or C office space. It was more like D.
Oh, okay.
But our floor had been completely renovated. But it's the kind of thing where we could get away with a lot of stuff. Like, a lot of places in Manhattan wouldn't let you have an air compressor or, a TIG welder or,
Right.
In office space, let's say.
Right.
Or they wouldn't let you go up on the roof and, shoot rockets off of it or things like that.
Oddly specific.
Yeah, you would be arrested. So, it was it was a nice balance because it was sort of like you're under the radar. It was a good fit. It was a really nice office, but it was also like, we got away with murder sometimes. Some of the things that we did.
It sounds like a really unique place and time.
That's a snowflake.
Yeah. Well, so you do this for 5 years. You take a little bit of a break at the start of COVID.
Yeah,
and
COVID was a reset for I think a lot of people.
You could say that.
I mean, it was.
So I mean, what was
COVID
next?
was kind of a big deal.
What was next after that?
Well, so the city zombified pretty quickly. I mean, it was weird actually. And so I'm up the river and I can like look down and see the city, and I'm like, looking up statistics on like, how many days of food there are in Manhattan.
Right.
And there's roughly 9 million people, eight and some change in the city, and the ratio of hospitals to population. I didn't know how like zombified it would go, and I'm on the east side of the Hudson, so I'm like, oh, watch them close the bridge and shut down the thruway, and then I'm like trapped, So I'm originally from upstate New York, so I just made the decision to like, I'm just gonna hang out with the folks and see what's going on up there. And if civilization completely collapses, we'll hunt deer and raise chickens or something like that. It'll be fine. I didn't go there. I sat on the couch and I watched a lot of YouTube and Netflix. But after about a year, I was like, well, I had a townhouse on the Hudson. Hudson Views, not like literally on the water. I couldn't afford that. But I had a mortgage and stuff, and I was like, well, maybe I should, the party seems to be ending. So this was early 2021, I had done the GameStop thing, I had gambled on the internet, that was over. I should probably get a job or something.
Did you make money on that? Are you being serious?
More than I deserved, but far less than
that's crazy though.
If you see my retirement account, there's sort of like, the average, whatever. And maybe slightly beating the S&P 500.
That's wild.
But then there's this huge, like the scale is screwed up on my chart because there's this huge spike about this high, and then it crashes back down to roughly the picks up the mean curve again. It's a return to the mean.
So you did what I was thinking of doing, but ultimately decided I didn't. That's one of the things that I still kind of kick in. I had like $600 that year. I was like, you know what? What if I just put it in GameStop stock for the funny? And instead, I was like, you know what? This is the first time ever, and one of the only times ever I was able to work. I was like, I'm gonna buy some Christmas presents for my family.
Aww.
And then I see the GameStop stock, and I'm like, oh, I could have bought so many more
Christmas presents.
Yep. Yeah, I have video and screen caps and stuff, and it was wild, and it was. I wish I'd been a little smarter because the thing to do was to have set up automatic. Like the thing was like if you sat there and watched it, which I did, 'cause I had nowhere else to go.
You get it.
It was crazy how rapidly it moved. It was almost like you could barely buy or sell it because they just kept stopping the trading, and then you'd wait 10 minutes and it was like this, and you're like, I don't know what to pay. So if I was smart, I would have walked away with a lot more by having automatic, levels and making some decisions. But I walked away with far more than I deserve for being a guy who knows nothing.
What? Okay, so
nothing.
That aside,
Anyway.
what was next?
Well, I started kind of like soft looking for a job, and I found so I was upstate in the Finger Lakes region. And there's this company in the town that I grew up in that makes air guns, and I never really thought much about them, to be honest. But I noticed that they were hiring for an air gun engineer, and I'm like, well, that's interesting because that's kind of what I do. But I don't know. So I was just researching them a little bit, and I see that I think it was in their store. They were like selling this high-powered Nerf blaster thing. I'm like, what? And in this little town, it's like 3,000 people in this town, maybe 3,300 possibly. And it's a factory with, 300-400 people, maybe in its height. And I was like, are they making this here? Like here in the U.S.? And wait, what? And so I basically just called them up and said, yeah, I should talk, you should talk to me. And so I got an interview and was pretty much hired on the spot. I think. All right. I was just told later in the day.
Well, how often do you find someone in your local town who has specific experience in the a lot of specific experience in the very specific thing that you're trying to hire for?
Yeah, and it was this new initiative from them. So then I went to go work for GameFace, which is really Crosman is the real company, but then they were wrapped up in a holding company called Velocity Outdoor. So
right.
It was confusing working there. You might see those
Daisy
three names.
And all that stuff, right? BB type stuff.
Well, they're like the classic BB pellet gun company. Yeah. They're it's interesting. They're exactly as old as Hasbro, 1923. So they were both.
That's funny.
Yeah, they both had their 100th anniversary recently. Although Crosman has some sort of prehistory before it goes back to the 1800s or something, but it wasn't incorporated or something like that. But
okay.
Yeah, and what they were doing was they were working with Jet Blasters, which is Global United, and they were sort of doing a private label, slightly customized version of Aceta, essentially.
Right.
And they had sort of built a sort of a business around this, and it was doing okay-ish, but when I joined, they were very, very, very ambitious. And the business that they were doing wasn't, because there was too many layers to it, Jet themselves doesn't really manufacture anything. They have factories in China.
Yeah.
So, it would be like trying to buy a blaster from, Zuru and then resell it yourself, with, at a higher price.
Right.
So it was pretty tough, the way that their costs were structured. They kind of had to sell the GameFace Prime for I think when it started, it was above $100, but I think it pretty quickly came down to 80, 90 something, somewhere in there, and then floated down through time. But they were kind of plugging along with this relationship with Jet. But what happened was, because of, I don't know the full story, but there's some drama here, but Jet kind of went away. And shipments stopped of the product, and then things that were in development just sort of stopped. So it was dead. I've heard that Global United still kind of exists as a company. I think they make T-shirts or something. They kind of fell back into maybe more of a hobby business.
Yeah. Because I know at one point the Jet Ceta was one of the big names, and then it just sort of disappeared.
They were an early mover. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that happened was that the GameFace Prime, I believe, came out April, May, maybe. Maybe it was a little bit late, a little closer to the summer of 2020, right? Yeah, 2020. And so what happened is October, and the Nexus Pro came out, and it was it didn't matter. It was 150 FPS instead of 130. Didn't have a scar barrel, but it was $49.97 at Walmart with the ammo on the shelf, and it was just everybody knows the story. That was the first sort of mass market. Go to Walmart, wow, 14 and up.
Yep.
Ignoring something like Rival. I mean, the 14 and up was something that has been doing for a long time, but it was half dart, hobby focused, pump action.
I'm sure everybody listening to this remembers the Nexus Pro, how it dominated discussion in the hobby for so long, and it was just okay, now it's now it's the lesser brother of a million similar designs.
Well, it was successful, and that's what happens when you're successful. You get taken for granted.
So did part of that lead to the Tryon? Is that part of how you ended up there?
Yeah, most definitely. So when I got there, there was a little bit of housekeeping to do, and there was, it was a rough time because COVID was still going on. So everyone's wearing masks in the office, and I don't think the vaccine was out yet.
Yeah.
And all the stuff with supply chains and shipping, and it was a very chaotic environment. Everyone was just trying to get things done, make certain products, get things shipped in, sell them. It was a crazy time, and but there was sort of I guess a theme that might come up again is that there were multiple competing systems inside this company for making products, and that really explains a lot of the issues.
Interesting.
So it took, when I got there was a bit of deck clearing, there was a bit of like cleanup and refocusing. One of the things that was weird, I guess I should say this, is that I came in and I was like, well, I was director of operations at this other place, but also I always had a project or two, or sometimes three that I was doing. It sounds like you guys are trying to launch this new blaster brand. You have one product out, but like, how do I fit into that? And so they didn't hire me as a director of operations. GameFace is not a company. It doesn't have like its own address or separate financial books or it's really not an entity. It's just a brand.
Yeah.
So there was like nothing to be, there was no like director of new product development at GameFace or anything like that. And the job that was open was, an airgun engineer. And so they said, well, that's all we can really hire you for. And I said, well, I'll take it because it's, near the ground floor of a new blaster brand, and I would rather be here and see where that goes. But then very quickly it did sort of turn into, I think what's on my LinkedIn is a blaster, chief blaster officer, because that's what the job actually was.
CBO.
Yeah, I don't consider myself an entrepreneur. I'm an intrapreneur.
Okay. So, I'm navigating into the Tryon because I'm curious how. So, like, you wind up in a sort of a leadership position here, and you're responding to where the market's going with the Nexus.
Well, there was a huge, I think, fear there that there was going to be no new shipments of the GameFace Prime. This company was very, very, very. They were owned by private equity, which is another thing that'll come up.
Yeah.
They had to have. It was like blood money. They had to have sales.
Right. It had to keep moving. There had to be movement.
So there was an extreme fear of running out of GameFace Primes, which is kind of hilarious because the Tryon is now gone. I don't even know where you can buy one anymore. But the damn GameFace Prime is for sale for like
right.
$29.99 or something. Like it's still on the store shelves at like Modell's or the Tractor Supply Company or something.
I can only imagine at the like corporate meeting when the GameFace Prime was like out, and then you have the Nexus come out, what that looks like, because you have the Prime, which is a CETA, which is an X-CETA. So you have an X-CETA that came from Explorer that then turned into the CETA licensed by Jet, which then goes to the Chinese factory, that then gets reskinned as a Prime, that then goes to you guys, and then you're like, there's this loss leader that's $50 that was designed from the ground up from one person, or one entity. How do we compete with that? That would be a headache.
Well, it was just a total shit sandwich.
Can you also touch on the relationship with Busby related to the Tryon? Because people talk about that sometimes, and it'd be great to get it from the source.
Sure. Well, so the Tryon kind of turned from like, hey, we need a successor product, because there's this roadmap, and the roadmap was a bit, the roadmap is, I'll tell you one thing, the roadmap was the craziest roadmap I ever saw. The way I remember it is that there was 22 products, either starting design, in the middle of design, or finishing design and then going to market. There was 22 in flight, in the air, in 2022. And I think that many separate individual products would have killed even Hasbro's resources. But so the Tryon was actually a crash project. It was designed in about 4 months. It was architected. Of course, I pulled apart several Nexus Pros, and there's not a ton. They did some clever cost reduction. but they're not. There's nothing about the architecture that's particularly new or innovative or never before seen or wrapped up in patents or difficult to understand or it was a pretty simple beast. And in fact, I like to think that some of the stuff we did, we simplified the basic architecture of a sealed breech, spring pump action blaster. There's not a ton to it. It is kind of the design of a single mind. And so there were things about it that we didn't like. I lived with it for as long as I could, and then helped to architect. Like, okay, well, what could we do? And I really didn't like a lot of things about the GameFace Prime also. So it was sort of like, okay, what do we want to not do? So sometimes what you say no to is more important or as important as what you say yes to. So that went through a development process. And then the problem is that the old way that they got products relied upon this relationship with Jet. So they didn't have their own factory. There was a sourcing department in Hasbro, but it was like, or not Hasbro, listen to me. There was a sourcing department inside Crosman.
Yeah.
But, it's so difficult to create a new thing inside an old company like that because, it's a new business. It makes $0 or very little. And there's a lot of internal resistance. People are like, look, I'm not going to source your parts. It's all plastic. We don't even do plastic. Like, I'm busy ordering Turkish walnut, and shipping it to, Spain to be built and that's way more important. That goes on a PCP gun that sells for $800, and that's way more important that gets done and, kind of screw your stuff. So we were like super rogue, and in a lot of ways we were like an alien trying to burst out of the chest of this place. Like or an unwanted pregnancy or something. Something not very great. And so, were we this new thing they wanted to birth, or we were like a parasite that like the organization wanted to kill, and it was like you're sucking up resources, and it's like the people designing other products were like flinging peas at you in the cafeteria and things like that. So this is why a lot of effort was spent building our own space and trying to get the heck away from the rest of the company, basically. In the military, they call it getting away from the flagpole, which is getting away from, where the big wigs are and the bases.
But you're talking about literally physically being able to have your own shop and like access to your own resources and stuff.
When I started there, they took me to like a cubicle. I've never worked in a cubicle in my life. There was a computer with one screen, like a telephone. I disconnected it and put it in the drawer, like a landline. There was a really ratty office chair that should have been thrown out. And I said, cool, where am I really going to work? Where's your R&D lab? And they were like, what? I was like, So what I did is I started to, one of the things that I did, and it's kind of shocking that they were run by private equity, which is very focused on like squeezing the money out of everything, possible. I'm surprised that like, we were allowed to, order Post-it notes or something. But I acquainted myself very rapidly with the processes by which you were allowed to buy things and the limits, the monetary limits. And I made good friends with some of the purchasing people. And I talked to everybody in that place, from the cleaning people to the, maintenance guys to the head of intellectual property, the head of their legal department, and tried to make friends everywhere because I needed them. And we just started buying. I turned like that Facebook picture you see of Kite and Rocket.
Yeah.
That's what my cubicle started to look like. I bought a lathe that was this big. So like there are other people on the phone and stuff, and like more computer focused types, let's say, and I'm over there like
you're over there machining little tiny parts.
I'm like grinding a steel shaft with a Dremel that's about spinning on the lathe. I gotta cut the shaft away.
Okay, I want to get to the Busby relationship,
so
and then
I
want to find out
sourcing.
about the ending about how Blasterface ended.
Well, we did our own sourcing, and it was rough. It was I think it was like 9 or 10 places we tossed the Tryon to, and we had an early prototype that was partly machined, but largely FDM printed actually, and it was weird. I was shocked that it worked because Like even the plunger tube was FDM. So I don't know. We just used really thick silicone grease, and it was fine. It was fine. It was sealed. But that went to China, and there was the other person that was there. I should say this because it wasn't. I don't want to make it sound like it was a one-man show. Especially later, I had my interns. I want to give them credit too. But the person that created GameFace, really, or GameFace Blasters, let's say, because GameFace exists as originally a paintball brand and then an airsoft brand, was the product manager who was there. And so what had happened is Walmart had, and other big retailers too, like Dick's, and had been banning and getting airsoft products off the shelves because they were seen as, as a political issue. I mean, they look too much like real guns.
Right.
They're associated with, people getting hurt and stuff. And so it was sort of something that was like Walmart, I think, it was 2017, 18 or 19, something like that. They just said, we're done. We'll sell the inventory. We're not going to order anymore. That category's gone. And that represented, I think the airsoft business was, 15-ish. I don't think it was 20 million, but it was like somewhere in the high teens. And that they just it was like, boom, there goes $9 million a year. And so she was sort of managing that portfolio, and it was like, wow, what the heck do we do? So she surveyed the rest of the field in terms of what products are out there that you can, shoot people with. And this is a weird thing inside Crosman because the other products, the two things really shouldn't even be in the same building, Right. The other products are literally can kill you. They're for hunting, or like the BB guns, you can get seriously hurt. They're definitely not.
Shoot your eye out.
Yeah, they're not really, I mean, people do shoot each other with BB guns, but
yeah.
It's a totally different animal, and especially, I mean, the top end of their product lines are big caliber things, and people hunt like water buffalo with them and things like that.
Yeah. Was connecting with Busby just about finding someone else who sort of understood the area?
I forget where
of
it came from. I want to say that the product manager said, hey, I have a contact at Busby. Should we toss them this to quote? And I said, look, we were looking at some pretty obscure companies that were just approaching toy molders, and not necessarily specialized in making this kind of product. And so I don't remember who suggested where it came from. I think it came from her end and just her research and stuff. And I said, absolutely, you should reach out and see what they can do. And it turned into, productive conversation. And it was a good fit because Busby was very much not interested in doing anything 14 and up. And they weren't, I think, the liability of those kinds of products. And I know it's the kind of thing where like everyone else is doing it, but at the time, very early on, there was a lot of difficulty with how to import these things, how to categorize them, how to test them, what ASTM standard they fall under.
I mean, that's still an ongoing problem.
Yeah,
it is actually, because it's sort of like, well, are they toys or not toys? It's well, they're not toys. It's well then. Right. It gets weird because like Walmart will just call up and ask you to test the product to the non-powdered gun standard, which is what pellet and BB guns are tested to. And in general, these products are going to fail that testing.
Right.
So what do you rubber stamp them as?
Right.
So I think Busby was very happy to sit on the sidelines, and they were very much a toy company.
They get to get their foot wet in this market without committing to it or taking on any of the risk.
Yeah, and the space that Crosman was in, Crosman was just used to the liability. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good attitude, but they're just used to getting sued so much every year because someone does their eye out. And, there's the instruction manual, and they include safety glasses with things, and there's supposed to be adult supervision for the product, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, they're kind of just getting sued as a bit part of the business, I suppose. Yeah. Whereas when you're coming from the toy space, you work really, 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 really hard to not get sued ever at all. And, you fail typically, but you just don't have the same sort of acceptance of that liability. So it was a great fit. So what was crazy, though, is Busby never saw the prototype. So I think it was November. So what was crazy is the design of the Tryon was really, it was ready for tooling quotes in August of 2021.
Okay.
But then it was like, I don't think we had negotiated the agreement and who was going to carry the insurance, and there was a lot of these moving pieces to satisfy Busby's requirements of that separation of, who holds the liability maybe, and the contract and all that stuff. And that wasn't sorted out until November. So there was a bit of a long pause there, and then Busby was like, "Great, we need a prototype."
Yeah.
So one of the things that had happened is the process at this company was probably not great in an overall sense, but was certainly not the right process for these types of products. It was very rigid, like, we've always done it this way. Why do we have to do it different? It's like, well, you're trying to do something new, right? Like these are, they're toys, but they're not toys. There's some contradiction there, I know. But, these are out, manufactured in China, designed here. They're meant for shooting at people, the audience, the different customer. The person who's buying a Nerf blaster is not the person who's looking for a 177 pellet gun to shoot squirrels. Just not the same customer. And so one of the things that I said there when I worked there a lot is, look, you can't do what you've always done and then have something new happen. If you want to do something new, you've got to do something new. Yeah. So this is new. So it's not like before. So we have to do these other things. So I would protested aggressively that we need to build prototypes and actually test them, because we kind of just slammed. We had the first thing that worked, and then that was like to the factory, and I was like, oh, this is how stuff blows up in your face.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it worked, right? Because the
gave us a reason to go build prototypes, and we were off to the frickin' races then. And then it was a sprint. It was actually just a little over a year until it was December of 2020. No, it was December of 2022 that they were for sale. So sort of from flipping the switch with Busby to like product landed in the United States, and you can place an order on the website and it actually goes somewhere. It was a little bit over a year.
That's awfully fast, right?
That's what I was telling the culture at Crosman, because they had their own factory and a lot of the products they built were kind of just like parts bin specials. Well, we have extra inventory here, and we'll plug this into this, and that'll be the new product. So they thought things could be made in 3 months, and I said, depending on the shipper and stuff, sometimes things are on the water for 2 months.
Right.
So they weren't really used to a global business contract manufacturing business model, and it is true. Like even when you go fast, it's about 18 months. Yeah. It could stretch to 2 years, but if it stretches beyond 2 years, there's usually a problem, and you're usually not going to see the product. Or if something takes 2 or more years, it's because it's cycling around internally, and it's not getting out. But once it's actually out into the factory, it's about a year. Okay. And if you're tight, you spent 6 months, taking it from nothing, an idea, to something you can give to the factory. So yeah.
So Trion comes out, and it was pretty successful. Seems like.
Depends on how you measure success. It was shocking that it actually came into existence. From my perspective. Fair enough. I mean, the hobby liked it for sure, but obviously that's not the bulk of your market. Well, it was initially. Isn't. I mean, that's who we were targeting. Is especially I didn't consider the GameFace Prime to really be product development. It was purchasing, or private labeling, whatever you want to call it. And when the Trion was the first real effort by Crosman or by GameFace to get a product that was theirs. And a lot of times when you ship that first product, I mean, think of when Dart Zone made the Mark I. Like, there's 1,000 of them, and they were only available online. What was it, $199 or $189 or something? And who the heck are you selling that to? And the answer is like sort of your top 1, 2, 3, 4% insane customers. Right. Like the cutting edge, the people who buy everything, the people who are the obsessive, crazy, most critical, hard to please. So I mean, if it was more or less in the market that it was intended for, I mean, what happened to GameFace? Well, let's see. I guess that gets back to the theme of having multiple competing systems and not having, and ultimately it gets back to, I think, the way that businesses are structured when they're owned by private equity is when when you're owned by private equity, it's really, really, really hard to do something innovative and something new because they're just squeezing everything, and it's about what they can get right now. And
Right.
Well,
because we know, a lot of private equity, what's happening to companies in private equity right now is they're just being bought to be dismantled. So,
yes.
Yeah.
My experience of private equity was not positive, and dismantled is a good description of what happened when I worked there. When I started, there was more than 300 people working there, and they were running 2 or 3 shifts at the factory because everyone thought that everyone was going to have to close down, but it turns out no, people are at home, they have tons of money, oddly enough, Crosman's products, air guns, were a thing that were selling like hotcakes because, I don't know, it's outdoors, and maybe people were buying them because they thought they could fend off zombies with them or something, or they thought if the world ended they could hunt, hunt pigeons and eat pigeons or something. I don't know what the heck it was, but people didn't have money for Disney or for world travel or for lots of things, but people were buying. And I think the same was true of Nerf, is that there was difficulty getting product in and keeping it on the shelf, but that there was no problem selling toys.
Well,
and
it's a thing to do at home with your family, for Nerf at least.
And maybe you'll have to shoot your neighbor to take his fire.
Right. Exactly. Well, okay, so where does this leave GameFace?
Well, there was sort of 2 parallel efforts going on, which was to sort of do in-house, designed, Busby manufactured products that were trying to kind of please the hobbyists, but at a price that could be placed on a store, near the upper end of the price points that are possible at Walmart. Mm-hmm. So, like for instance, I know the Tryon, when it came out, it was $79.99. I don't know how that price got set. It was like, a lot of different prices I think were considered. The way the product was designed was like a Nerf blaster, and if you actually I think I'm allowed to say this, is I can't necessarily say exactly what the cost was or whatever. Or maybe I can because it's like the company's gone. I have no idea. I have to talk to my lawyer. But the selling on a website and in small quantities, maybe you kind of do need that 70-ish buck, price point. But if you actually were, if Walmart bought it, totally different set of economics.
Yeah.
A lot of people maybe don't know this, is that I'm not quite sure. Hasbro, I think, has multiple businesses, but a lot of the products that are at Walmart, like in the Blaster aisle, it's not like the company designs it, then orders it from the factory, then the factory ships it to a warehouse, then it goes onto trucks and things, and gets delivered to different stores. What actually happens is to crush the price down to nothing, but also because Walmart wants control, and Walmart wants the rock bottom prices, and also Walmart's going to squeeze you and the vendor and the factory all the way back in China, is that once the product's kind of designed, Walmart imports it themselves directly from the factory. And this is why they often have to approve the vendor. They have to make sure that there's compliance with labor, environmental, child labor laws, things like that.
Well, and what you're explaining for the audience's benefit is Adventure Force. That's how that brand works. Is that
Hasbro, though, I don't think, I might be wrong here, but I don't think Hasbro traditionally brings in. Hasbro's so big, they have multiple channels, sales channels. So like Hasbro does have warehouses and does truck stuff, but a lot of those orders might be going to there's sort of Walmart and Target, and that's maybe 40% of the market. Maybe more.
But so you're not necessarily just because even Hasbro has Walmart exclusive products and stuff sometimes, but
a lot of times Walmart is directly importing. Even within Walmart's like a universe. So Walmart has, I believe, 7 internal sales channels, and so Crosman's in what's called the national channel, where Crosman does get stuff made wherever, including their own factory, but sometimes they outsource stuff. And then Crosman has a warehouse, and they put stuff in the warehouse, and then when Walmart wants to buy it, they send them shipments from their warehouse, or sometimes Walmart trucks pull up to the warehouse and they load them. This is one of the things I think that caused problems, is that Crosman was not aware of the existence of the other sales channels within Walmart and how different they are. And so the sales channel blasters are in, is called the import channel.
Yeah.
And that's literally like Walmart places the order with the factory and is the importer of record, pays the tariffs, pays the shipping, which like Walmart's shipping price, they have probably the lowest shipping prices on the planet.
So Crosman was manufacturing its own stuff overseas, importing it, and then selling it to Walmart when they could have been using
with a lot of products. Yeah. And it's not necessarily bad to play in multiple channels with a company like Walmart, because for the season you might do an import channel order for the bulk of your product, but then if something sells really well, you're like, wow, shelf's bare. And this is why you'll see like Dart Zone and Zuru, like a lot of times when I go to Walmart, it's like it's hit or miss whether there's something on the shelf from those companies. And that's because and I might be wrong about this, because these are larger, sophisticated businesses, and my impression was though that they largely were in the import channel, and that they didn't necessarily have a nationwide logistics system and a network of warehouses and stuff. But Hasbro, I think, does. And what's cool about being able to be in multiple channels is that, for spring, they order through the import channel, but then it's like, wow, we sold out of this, and this. Those are the hot ones. And if you say, hey, you want us to just ship you more of those from the national through the national channel, because we got inventory in warehouses. We can top you up.
You have backups, you have other routes.
Because if Walmart picks up the phone, like metaphorically, and calls the factory for another import order, it's months of production, and it's a couple months on the wall. It might be 4, 5, 6 months to get something, depending on how large the order is. So there's a huge delay. It's very low cost potentially, but whereas the national channel, like if you're just there and you have product, you can just sort of inject it where you need to. So, and you have to be bigger to do that. But what was weird is that Crosman kind of had this old school business model, and they kind of could have fed Walmart through both the Walmart could have got stuff through the import channel themselves, which really helps lower the price, and then they could have also been sold through the national channel, and it could have been a great little system.
So in summary, Crosman was not very adaptable, and with game in a way that allowed GameFace to thrive, and also was owned by
private equity.
And kind of got carved up.
Perhaps had they explored other options, you could have sold the product cheaper, sold more of the product, and then the product could have been more sustainable.
Well, if Walmart the initial product that is sold as the Tryon, that probably would have never been sold as it was to Walmart. Is that one of the things that might be hard to understand if you're not in the biz is how long the road is to the shelf, and how hard it is to stand up a separate business and come in where you go to a Walmart and there's 3 or 4 big brands that cover the shelves, and to get your products shoved in there is just so damn hard.
Yeah.
So you almost have to sort of have smaller sales through, however the heck you can get them, Amazon, or if you have these other retailers, like if you could have gotten placed in Dick's Sporting Goods, and this is why sometimes the product, it's good to sell it in like a Tractor Supply company or a Modell's or Sporting Goods or something. And what you do is you start to be able to build a case to go to Walmart and say, look, here's what we're doing, here's what customers are saying, here's what the product is.
We're moving product consistently. It's not sitting in...
Walmart almost never, probably, at least in this category, is going to take exactly what you have now. They're going to have feedback on it, and they're going to say, why don't you have a rifled muzzle that spins the darts, and can we include 2? You got to take 5 inches out of the product. It's too long.
They get that specific. They like.
Oh yeah, very much so. Walmart's involved in a lot of product design and a lot of the minutia. I think they care about it, where it's manufactured, and every penny.
That's really interesting.
But the Tryon as designed, if Walmart just purchased it, just literally, I don't know about today because, inflation and so on, but if in 2022 Walmart was like, yeah, we'll take, I don't know, 100,000 or something for, spring, the Tryon could comfortably, while providing the top end actually of the industry standard margins for both the retailer and for GameFace, the manufacturer, and paying the factory, could have comfortably hit the shelf at you could have priced it relative to the Nexus Pro and made it $5 more if you thought like it was a premium product, but in terms of just margin numbers, everyone could have gotten the top end of what's normal in the blaster business, and they could have been put on the shelves for about $34.99.
Interesting.
Holy
And
crap!
that's really the kind of animal that it was.
Yeah.
And it could have been discounted more down to maybe $32.99 or $29.99 on a sale.
Had it launched that way, that would have been the undercut of like the
I
century.
know.
Like, would Zuru have even bothered
What
at that
Zuru
point?
did? Yeah.
They
yeah,
would
like,
have, because Zuru's relentless and insane.
Well, yeah, Zuru specifically probably would have.
Zuru is
Um,
specifically very relentless, but like I
This-
remember the
this
distinct
could have
thing
been
about
sort of like the XLS of 2020. Well, more like 2023 to be honest. If
Yeah.
Walmart did that.
I
Fascinating.
remember the distinct
Oh,
thing that
2023.
everyone was saying about it at like End War 2022 when everyone got their hands on it. They said the plastic quality felt really solid. It felt more premium than your
Yeah.
Nexus Pro, and everyone was really liking how consistent it was. It came
That's
in at like
fascinating.
that
Yeah,
price point. Holy crap!
Okay, we're getting pretty far behind. This is so fascinating, and I could talk about it forever. But I want to rapid fire a couple last things about this at you. One, Prime Tryon. Was there ever a 2-name blaster that was supposed to be in between those two?
There
Or
was,
was
a bunch
that
of
just a
products from-
coincidence?
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, that's just a coincidence.
Okay.
No,
okay,
yeah, there wasn't anything. There wasn't a ton of sophistication in the naming of the products. And
What was the deal with the Geon, and was that part of the end of GameFace, or was that just
the Geon is one of the
fluke.
internal competing ways of getting products. So that
Right.
there was a separate structure inside that company that was really sales and maybe marketing focused.
right?
And they
Because it was
didn't-
someone else was just manufacturing it, and you're just slapping a name on it, right?
Yeah, so imagine someone who doesn't really care that much about the product or the customer, and they say, why does it take so long to design one of these things? It's 18 months. That's crazy. I see these things on Amazon, and there's freaking a million of them. Just goddamn buy one, color it blue,
Right.
and put our name on it. And we got to sell stuff, right? And so people might have noticed that the Geon was pretty similar to some other
Yep.
or a other product.
I mean, I think that was always our suspicion, that the
Yeah.
hobby suspicion that's what that was.
Yeah, I'm even forgetting the name of it. Oh, well, I
original.
don't have the original, but I have. Oh, the Strike Master. Was it the Strike Master like 55 or the Strike Master
maybe.
77 or
It was
something?
something
like that.
along those lines.
Yeah, we looked it up when it happened. I don't remember.
It's actually a
now.
better product.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
What's crazy is that this took I think this took 16 months. So it was like, not so fast, was it?
Yeah.
Not so easy.
Yeah.
And
Well, because you have less flexibility, because this thing already exists, and you kind of have to work around whatever it already is.
Well,
right?
copying is not so fast, and especially when you toss it to someone who might be good at cosmetically copying something but doesn't really
Right.
understand how something works.
Right,
You'll
right.
get you get a great paper mache electric car if that all you care about is that it looks the same.
Yeah.
Okay. I forgot to ask you, what's your background before you started doing all of this?
Most of it. The biggest chunk of my career was spent, consulting, working at a company called Creative Engineering, which is the first place that I worked.
Right.
Like after moving out of my. Well, is that the first place I worked?
Well, so
no,
yeah, I guess
had a
that's
couple-
what
I had
I'm
a couple
wondering is
crap
like,
jobs, but
did you go to school for it, or did you like start? Did
Oh,
you
yeah,
just
but,
jump
you know,
right into
I'm-
it before?
I'm not really using my degree. What's
your degree in?
Well, I never got one, so that's why.
Oh, okay. Yeah, same.
Well, I think I'm 30 or so credits away from a BS in applied physics.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
All right.
Interesting.
a little bit applicable sometimes.
Yeah, that's relevant. That's relevant-ish.
Yeah.
And where are you at now? What's next for you?
Good question. Well, I'm actually I started my own little company and I'm just doing some consulting right now. I don't really know where it's going to go. I'll tell you something crazy is that I guess the way to end the GameFace story is that the company was what was hilarious. I mean, there's so many hilarious stories, and I know I can't tell them. Maybe some other podcast or something, because there's so freaking many, and some of them are actually pretty funny. But long story short, they tried to switch me to working on gel, which I was okay doing, but their gel line got kicked off of Walmart store shelves for really interesting reasons. You guys know all about the International Trade, U.S. International Trade Commission stuff. It was related to that.
Yep.
Because they didn't know to or weren't interested in licensing stuff from Hasbro and getting on the approved vendor list, and so it was just like that.
Yep.
So
we covered that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the gel job was kind of gone, and so I was gone, and then only 3 or 4 months later, the whole company was sold from one private equity company to another private equity company, and then they announced basically that they were liquidating it. And then at the last minute, they kind of pulled back from they fired almost everybody except for I think roughly 20 people, and I'm not sure. I think everyone kind of feels that that small group of 20 people is on probably borrowed time. The building's for sale. It's a very strange situation, and but there's no way in heck that they're interested in they got munged together with some other companies in a portfolio along with Daisy and I forget the other companies, the Gamma, but other airgun companies. And one of the things that had happened during my 2-3 years that I worked there was that they started out as that 300-person factory, but by the time I had left, it was at about 100 people roughly, and they had shipped probably 90% of the products that they were making in that factory to China. And so what was interesting is when you wanted to sell the company, Daisy, I believe, also doesn't really have any domestic manufacturing or very little maybe. And so
how's that looking now in 2025?
It made for a very neat and clean sale because it was like, well, we just sort of changed the invoices and where the checks go, and rejigger. There wasn't like production lines to move or machines or anything like that. So it was sort of neat and clean. But then, how is that working out at the moment?
Not great, I suspect. Oh, look, it's
GameFace
Daisy.
is kind of gone as a brand. Crosman exists, but they have no interest in any of the GameFace stuff, and they don't even seem to want to sell any of it. Wouldn't you know? I've been trying to buy back my lathe and CNC machine.
Right.
Some of the patents,
I saw you mentioning that.
I think they just dropped, so I don't even think I'm going to get the patents. Aren't even going to issue. So there goes the resume building.
Weird. Yeah. Well, okay. I'm glad that you have your own thing going now. But that's good at least. But we also have our own thing going. We have a Ko-Fi where folks can back us and support us as we work on our journalism, quote unquote, question mark. And
I think something.
One of the perks of backing us on Ko-Fi, and we've had a few new backers lately. Thank you all for joining us. Is that you get to ask our podcast guests questions. And so I have a few questions from a couple of those folks. Big Al of Monkeytron Collective and Foam Fest, who is, incidentally, our next podcast guest next week, because we did this one late, asks, what has been your favorite gimmick or innovation that you've seen on a blaster in your time in the space?
I'm kind of a sucker for drum mags when they work. So
well, you have some pedigree there.
I wasn't. I'm a little too. I'm like a cutting edge millennial, I guess. So when I was a kid, it was like the Blastzuka, like the ball blaster, and some of the Aerostorm and some of those products. And Nerf was more like foam swords and stuff. And it was also like the 80s and the 90s. They went through a period where like parents wouldn't buy their kids guns, and gun toys were very much not, So, like the even the elite style darts, or like the Slipstream or N-Strike style darts.
Yep.
Like the fact that they could go into a box magazine and then could chunk into and that you basically have a product that is now emulating all the functions and features of a firearm. That didn't exist in my world, but I wasn't even as like an older teen and young adult. Didn't grab me quite so much until I started working around some of this stuff. And then when the drum mags came out, I was sort of like, okay, this is really cool that I can like rip off 35 rounds on somebody.
I love that as your choice, because I think that the question was trying to get at like the Oozinator or like weird stuff, but it's like you have to go back and recognize that like the idea of having a magazine like that for your toy dart blaster is pretty wild.
It enables so many other things, which is why we were always arguing with Hasbro that the royalty rate should be higher. They said it's just an accessory; it's a part of the product. It should be less.
No, it's a core
we were like, no,
aspect.
it's enabling technology. You know,
Yeah.
it's disc brakes, man. You'll win Le Mans with them. You know,
Yeah.
what do you mean it's a part of the car?
Yeah.
Come on.
I've definitely made a joke about it on the podcast before, but yeah, the whole HVZ scene was like, this is going to break HVZ when
Right.
it first drops. Like, it was a game changer for a lot of people.
I don't really think you get flywheels without it. You know,
Many such cases.
You know, capacity, man.
Yeah.
Hopper fed stuff. That's where I'm at.
Right. I mean,
I'm all about the rival hopper stuff. KT knows.
Yes, I do. Okay. Emilio has 2 questions for you. 1, what is the number one thing you feel hobbyists just don't understand about developing commercial versus hobby products?
Well, it's probably just comes down to the fact that it's a business and it's a complicated business, and you know, when you're at the hobby level, and it's a lot of fun, but like, you know, you could be there's any number of people like Silly Butts. My mind's going blank as to other designers.
Slug,
But like Dan from Orion
whatever.
Blasters. Or,
Dan.
You know, you can sit there and design one product at a time, and it's really cool. It's, you know, you're the only like what you want to do is the only constraint. And, you know, I don't know, like if it sells anything, it's kind of impressive, you know, and fun. And, you know, you're not really doing it for the money anyway. And, you know, it can be the creation of one mind, and that no matter, you know, even if you're working for a relatively, you know, small blaster company, it's like, it's a very complicated business with a lot of constraints to it. And, you know, people are relatively specialized, and some people throw more weight than others. And sometimes it's amazing, like as an engineer or designer, that you can do something and it's cool and it makes its way through all the rest of the process and doesn't get cut out for cost and doesn't get thrown out without telling anyone, like by the factory. Like the factory literally just doesn't say, what's this thing for? Get rid of that. I don't know what that is. You know? And it actually ends up in the product. But it's a very complicated set of like simultaneous equations, and a lot of it's driven by business, you know, ultimately. And you know, like any big business, the end result can be kind of stupid, and so there's plenty of, you know, stuff to point at and say, oh, that was dumb, why'd they make that product? But on the other hand, it's kind of amazing when it does work.
Yeah. Take what you can get. Emilio also asks, do you think the commercial manufacturers are going to continue to lean into the hobby, or will they go back to their core customers, kids and caregivers?
I don't know. I mean, it's all about growth, and Hasbro and Nerf had this just huge climb up from, you know, the late 2000s to the 2020, and where to go next is always the issue. And I think there's also demographic things that are really at play. You know, it gets into birth rates, and, you know, like I could tell you right now in 8 years how many 8-year-olds there's going to be. Everybody knows, you know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can tell you how many 10-year-olds there's going to be in 10 years from now. And the demographics aren't looking great, you know. I do know that a lot of the companies have been looking at international markets, but it's difficult because the cost has to be crushed so low. So, like, what could you do for $1? You know, and if you could make something compelling for that, that occupies, I think, a lot of brain power for not just Hasbro, but also companies like Zuru. But the other pivot is the other side of that, which is the kid-adult, or the, you know, which is sort of condescending, but like the kid
The term is so funny.
Oh yeah,
It's
you know,
so funny.
We
Well,
tried to
I
explain the
saw you
kid-adult
saying
to them.
something about pitching that term to company leaders way before that, and then being like, nah.
Well, we did a lot of work at GameFace to try to understand our customer and find them. You know, GameFace was one of the early movers, not the earliest. It's just that it didn't necessarily convert on that very well. But there did seem to be a market for, you know, not little kids, you know, 14 and up, and maybe even 30 and up. We thought they were there. Sometimes we had a hard time explaining that to like Walmart buyers, which is sort of weird because I feel like they knew about it already, but they were just sort of giving us how can you sell toys that are 14 plus? Who's buying that stuff?
Right.
And I'm like, go to the Lego aisle. It's 18 plus. Like, kids are not buying the Frank Lloyd Wright Falling Water for $2.99.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, and some of the terms that are thrown around in some of these meetings, neck beard, basement dweller. I always used to like to use the term kid at heart. I didn't like kidult as a term.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that maybe Dart Zone takes the lion's share of the credit for discovering that market. I think GameFace saw it and thought that it was there, but Dart Zone is the one that got it.
Right.
and still has it, and then everyone else is then piling in including Hasbro. So I mean, if demographics and other factors are making it difficult, for you to grow your business because there just aren't the people, there isn't the market. You got to find a new market, and who doesn't like blasting someone with foam, I do think it was right to pivot. I think 14 and up has legs and still has legs. Still has places to go.
Cool.
And I think you might have a bigger business eventually selling to sort of 14 and up than you will to 8 and up, unless demographic trends change and everyone starts having we have a baby boom or something.
Yeah. Our last question comes from Icarus, who is actually our trivia raffle winner from the last episode, which we'll be getting to in just a moment, and asks, what is a product that you wanted to make it onto the shelf but never ended up working out?
Oh, God, there's so many. A lot of them are in my portfolio. A lot. We had a backpack-based rival hopper-fed blaster through a tube in late 2015 and early 2016, and that one was just so damn much fun. I think we could have done it. I think it didn't make it for cost reasons, but one of the things that sucks is that you put your first thing out there and it's like the first thing that works. You're like, hey, look, it's all working, and then someone's like, it's too expensive, and it's like the light bulb that first turned on, and it's like, it's made out of glass. We got to take the air out of the inside. That's crazy. How are we gonna do that? And well, okay, give me a little bit more time, and we'll cost reduce it. We'll figure out the process that makes it mass producible, et cetera, et cetera. Evaluating the cost a little too early sometimes kills things.
Yeah.
The rival drum's another one. So these are kind of things I think maybe people in the hobby have seen or leaked and know about it. That had made it out.
The rival drum leak is pretty famous.
The thing that probably gives me the most chest pain is the stuff we were working on at GameFace. Is we had a new air platform, that was going to be. We were doing kind of a Foursquare thing. So there was the marketing roadmap, which was 22 things, and it was like, just put that over there.
Yeah.
And internally, what we were doing in the lab was a Foursquare, and so we had a air bullpup and an air pistol, and the bullpup would have sort of sat above the Tryon in terms of performance.
Okay.
But they would have had the same architecture because a pistol and a bullpup have basically the same layout.
I mean, you had the holy trinity that, like, because it's like X-Shot's done it now where they have. I mean, theirs is an AEB, but they have that, and they have the shorter one and the longer one, and then like the Nerf ones are the short one and the long one, and the But that's really interesting that GameFace did have that sort of lined up.
We had a flywheel architecture that was going to then be shared between a flywheel primary and a flywheel pistol.
Right,
as well.
That's really clever. That's so cool.
And it was a lot of what, I mean, boy, if I could tell like the whole damn story and every little twist and turn and blow, is we had to be so efficient. So like a lot of how I did the development there, and nobody above me understood this, nobody next to me understood this, but my interns understood it, is that we can't, like, having nothing and being so, new, is you got to get a lot out of everything you develop. So it's like you can't do a clean sheet, wacky, crazy thing like, oh, let's do a shell-fed pump action tubular magazine shotgun. It's like, that's what you need. Is you need the thing that can be turned into 15 products.
Right.
And so to come up with architectures that then spit out a bullpup and then a pistol, and then you can make variations on those, and then some sort of core flywheel stuff that's your own unique thing. That then, that spits out a primary that's full auto, but it also spits out a cheaper flywheel pistol that's semi, but then later you can take those things and make a bunch of other configurations too. versus viewing it as a one product at a time. Oh, what would be a cool thing to make today?
Yeah.
You have to be strategic.
Well, and I think that's really key for people to understand who maybe don't understand the business side as much, because it's like people are tired of Nerf's front-loading smart AR things, but it's like they controlled the patent for that concept. Like, that's a really unusual concept, but we're so used to it that people get tired of it. But it's like, yeah, but the company needs to like come up with this idea and be able to reuse it to feel like they're making enough profit.
I think the
I
most
don't want to talk it
recent
up
thing
too
was
much
the,
in terms of like you got to leverage your technology, but then you don't want to be ruled by it. So,
right.
oh, we've got a patent for this thing. Figure out how to put that in every product.
Right. What were you gonna say, Grim?
The flip side of it.
I was going to say, I think the most recent example that's on everyone's mind is the current, with their new line, the agility reskins, like everything using the same cylinder feed system.
Yeah.
Most recent thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Got to make that technology pay. You know, those patents are expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't want to hire many more of those eggheads than we need to.
Yep. Speaking of eggheads, it's your opportunity to prove how much of an egghead you are as we get into our hobby trivia game. You've been involved in this hobby and business for a really long time, and you know a lot. So it's really hard for me to find a topic that I have any chance of stumping you on.
Oh man, well I don't know.
But on our Discord at 1:42 p.m. Eastern on February 22nd of this year, you said, and I quote,
"Oh God,
don't know anything about Worker." And then at 1:45, you follow that up with another message, which will be the title of our game today, Vile.
Oh, dang it. I can't see it in my
you
screen.
don't have it open.
I do have it open, but I can only scroll down.
Grim, you can read it then.
Pause for that. Oh, okay. Someone should go research Worker.
So that's our game today. You will be trying to answer 2 out of 3 of our multiple choice trivia questions correctly.
Oh man,
and
about
if you
Worker.
are,
Yeah, they are mysterious, aren't they?
You will get an opportunity, or our randomly selected person, which I actually did before doing this, is CR Nerf, a recent podcast guest who was randomly selected to ask a question of Big Al, organizer of Foam Fest and other things, on the next episode. You ready?
I guess. Are we like stalking Worker now?
Well, so I mean,
screen kept their Facebook page.
This also felt like a good thing, considering that, as I mentioned at the top, we have this opportunity for folks to ask questions of the boss at Worker. So a little bit of a just sort of like get the juices flowing, thinking about Worker. Vile, are you able to read a question from where you're at? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I had scrolled down. That was why I didn't get to the top, because I had scrolled down to the questions. All right. In late 2014, videos by Drac and Psych, I believe that's their name.
Yeah, that's how he pronounces it.
Yeah, discussed a new product by a mysterious new company called Worker. This item was the first Worker product to receive media attention. What was it? Is it A, AK-style shoulder stock, B, Retaliator upgrade spring, or C, 15-round banana magazine?
Oh, this is going to be rough because I was not watching that much Nerf Tube in 2014. I think I saw Drac shoot a cheese ball.
That's like my prime time.
I kind of want to say, I mean, a lot of Worker's early products were magazines. I guess I'm going to go with the magazine because I don't think that Drac would put together much of a video about just a rival, just a new spring for like a recon or something like that. And I feel like Worker's more of a molding company than I don't know where they get their springs from, but I don't feel like they live and die by their spring design tech. I think they're more of a molder and an assembler. So I'm gonna go with the clear banana mag.
All right, you'd be correct. Yes, it is the 15-round banana magazine. Actually, that
I test really well. This is why I graduated.
Also, hey, I'm the same.
I'll take question 3.
I am the same.
Oh, you want to do 3? Okay,
I want to do 3.
Sure, you got it. Okay, so we're 1 up, and
correct.
I will go ahead and read question 2 for you. Coop772's long-running YouTube channel covered a wide variety of Worker products over the years before quitting making YouTube videos in the summer of 2023.
Rip Coop.
What were the first and last worker products that he reviewed? Was it A, first, Elite Alpha Trooper 3D printed parts kit, and last, Worker Quinlan? B, first, Worker Retaliator pump grip, last, Worker Harrier? Or C, Worker Hurricane, last, Worker Phoenix 2.0?
I think it was the pump grip and the Harrier.
Why?
I'm just thinking about the period in time in which Coop left, and I don't think the Kunlun was out. I think it was the Harrier, and I remember he really liked it, and I want to say that he reviewed it after the Triumph, which he liked a lot. We sent him samples, like there was no we didn't pay him, or there was no here's a bag of money, say good things about us.
I think that's how he operated. I don't think anyone really paid him to do reviews. I think his YouTube following, he was like the one person in the hobby that had a YouTube following that was big enough that he could actually make money off of it.
Coop was all natty.
Yeah. But you are correct. It is the Retaliator pump grip first and the Worker Harrier last.
Coop being excited about, like a foregrip or something is like a piece of like tactical gear, and like again, worker coming from like a place of being a molder kind of first.
Well, he followed it up with like a full Retaliator build after that with like all of Worker's parts for it, because I think one of the, because at the time you still had to buy it from Taobao. It was before Worker Mod or anything opened. But like one of those Taobao or not Taobao, but like one of the companies sent him a big care package. And so he like did build outs from all of it and talked about it. All right. So you've already won, but we're reading you the third question anyway.
Yep.
Okay.
Grims, you're up.
Before I get into the third question, the reason I chose this question is actually because the opening sentence for this one, that minutia is specifically why one of my first and largest big investigative stories had to get axed at the cutting room floor. So anyways, according to Worker Sales affiliate WorkerMod.com, not the same company, important emphasis, they have shipped Worker products to 27 countries, but some of the birds that Worker blasters are named after have an even wider reach. Two of the following bird species with a namesake, Worker blasters, naturally are occurring in all continents other than Antarctica, but one of them has a more limited scope of origin. Which one is it? Is it A, Nightingale, B, Swift, or C, Harrier?
So the question is, which one has a I might have missed that. That might have flown over my head.
That was a good one. Flown over your head. Two of the
following bird species with a namesake, they're naturally occurring in all continents other than Antarctica, but one of them has a more limited scope of origin.
More limited scope of origin. Nightingale. Yep. What were the other two?
Swift and Harrier.
I don't know my birds very well. I really don't. I'm gonna say the Swift because, and this is just literally, there's a bunch of different kinds of nightingales, and there's songs and things about them in both Europe and America. So I'm guessing that they're a little more distributed. And the Harrier, I don't know what the hell a Harrier is, but I think it's a class of birds, like falcon. There's a zillion. There might be like 20 or 30 or 40 different kinds of falcons. Couldn't tell you all the different ones. So I feel like there's probably 20 or 30 different Harriers. But a Swift, I don't even know what the hell a Swift is. I mean, I know what the blaster is, but I don't like the bird Swift, So I'm going to go with Swift.
You would be incorrect. The answer is A, Nightingale.
Oh, really?
So weirdly, the nightingale only naturally occurs in parts of Europe and northern Africa. We
don't have American nightingales or anything like that?
It's in the Americas, but it does not naturally occur here. It is I don't know if it's it's invasive. I don't know how much nightingales take over the ecosystem that they're in, but they're not naturally occurring here.
Oh man, the birds! I lost it at the birds.
But you still got 2 out of 3, so CR Nerf, you get a free question of our next guest, Big Al. Thank you for playing our game, Chris. That was fun. Good. See, I was able to stump you with birds, I guess.
Yeah, we had to get into birds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but,
I was gonna say that would have been a hard question to answer. I feel like.
but yeah, folks, get me your questions for the fine folks at Worker. You can go deeper than what animals are you naming out your blasters after. Feel free to send us your crazy questions for them, and we will see what we can put together to send over there. I want to chat briefly about a few other sort of topics of current relevance and get your perspective on them. We talked a little bit last episode about the X-Shot AEB, but we talked about it from a little bit more of a nuts and bolts perspective because people were really kind of just looking at like, oh, it's got this and it's got this and it's got this and it costs this much. I'm more curious about your perspective on Zuru's approach to doing a pro line, having ushered a pro line into existence and watched as all the other brands have done so as well. Zuru has a really unique sort of market that they sock it in kind of a unique and specific way, and I'm curious what you think it may have taken for them to do this, how long they've been working on it.
Are there like internal shots yet?
I don't think we've seen that for the
haven't seen
AEB yet.
any. Yeah.
No, a couple people have them in hand, but I think that most of them are sellers of them and aren't breaking them down yet.
Yeah, they have the samples, but I'm pretty sure they might be waiting on it. Maybe there's maybe an NDA or something. I have no idea, or embargo.
It's gonna be a little bit hairy, so maybe it's just like if there's only one in somebody's hands, they do not want to pull it apart. And
right.
I've actually pulled apart AEBs and like not bothered to like just give it up and putting it back together. So we'll just buy another one.
Yeah.
We have confirmed that it is very much like the BK1S, though, that Chinese branded one, the Zeus branded one. We know that the functionality is very similar.
Yeah.
So, but the one thing that's because I did the segment on it, and I was very shocked when you look at them side by side. They do look very similar. Right. Klein was able to confirm that it has the semi and full auto. It functions very similarly.
Well, so maybe that's part of the answer to this question, which is like, how does Zuru wind up being the first company with a pro AEB?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One is where they're coming from. So they're not a small business, but they're heavily diversified. And so you got to kind of, I think, look at them differently than you look at Dart Zone or Busby, who are very much focused on blasters. Whether they're, Busby does the line of water blasters, but Dart Zone is just like pretty much just blasters. And I guess also, I guess Dart Zone also does or did. Do they still do gel? But Zuru's a lot like Hasbro. Big company, big ambitions. They're different in many ways, but they're a billion plus, or multi-billion-dollar company at this point. And they're they seem to want to rapidly expand. And Nerf is their target.
Right.
I feel like Busby takes a certain approach to Nerf and sells to a certain segment. Certain price points in certain segment of the market. Dart Zone does the same thing, except they've kind of done this thing where, instead of coming from sort of below with like a value proposition, they've wrapped around and are now offering, things that are, 30, 40, 50 bucks and up, that are sort of on the other side of Hasbro at this point. But Zuru's like aimed right at the meat and potatoes, I think, of Hasbro, and that they're very, very aggressive, and they're a very different animal. But also when you are gunning for first place, you're hungry, you're willing to take more risks, you're willing to do some unusual or unconventional things. And a lot of times when you're in that first place position, you're overly conservative, and it might also just be culturally. I think Hasbro is a more, a more conservative company in a lot of ways in terms of, worrying about risk and, not wanting to do anything, too off the beaten path, but also, as opposed to like aiming for that, 8 and up age range, which Zuru certainly does. That Zuru's now trying to run the same play as Dart Zone, basically, and so why are they the first? Why didn't Dart Zone, design an AEB? before, given the fact that they're sort of out there in front of everybody else with, a very diverse, like multiple lines of products. I mean, when you actually go to their website and look at everything they make, it's like, wow.
Well, and if they are listening to the hobby's been asking Dart Zone to make an AEB specifically.
It might just come down to economics. I don't know. I wish I knew more. But my understanding is that Dart Zone is fundamentally a Chinese company. I don't know if they own their own factories or what their supply chain looks like.
Easebond Services Limited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that just might be a legal entity for their intellectual property. Yeah. I'm not sure. I wish I knew more.
What is the language they used when they emailed us? They said it was like fully aligned or something. It's like, okay, sure.
Fully owned subsidiary,
whatever that means. I think it's just the legal entity name in China. Like it's the same company functionally.
It can get a little mysterious in China because it's like an onion. It's like you think you're dealing with like the Sunshine Happy Ball toy factory. But, they're owned by, like, this other company you've never heard of, who's then owned by, like, like Shenzhen Industrial Concerns, who's then owned by, like, the Guangdong, industrial conglomerate, who's then owned by the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm actually curious about something, though, with this. You mentioned earlier how Walmart, if a company is getting something, like if it's being covered by Walmart. Now, X-Shot's not in the Adventure Force lineup, correct? Like
they used to be.
They were,
but they're not currently, especially under the Pro line stuff. So what I was curious about, because when I covered this as well, I noticed that the BK1S, roughly, depending on where you get it from, ranges from about $150 to $160. I think Out of Darts had them on sale for like $135. And then when we looked at it, there was a Walmart listing for this AEB, and it was $70. It was $69 and some change. And I was wondering, even though it's not under the Adventure Force lineup, if the fact that it's being covered or obviously imported, would Walmart be taking that? And is that why it's able to get that price point? Because that was another shocker, was that price.
Yeah, there are, volume matters, and there's price breaks for greater volume. You'd have to dig into, like, was that on a Walmart store shelf or was that Walmart.com?
It was Walmart.com, so obviously
was that
so
sold
we'll have
by
to
Walmart,
see.
Or was that a third party seller?
I'd have to go back and look at it. Obviously, if that was.
If it was a third party seller, it could be someone who just like bet the farm and said
this is what we think it's going to be.
Placed a $500,000 order or something and said and that's how they got the price. But yeah, volume's a big part of the equation, Dart Zone seems to do pretty decent volume. So like, well, why couldn't they offer if it's just about volume, why isn't Dart Zone and it wouldn't surprise me if they're working on it. Maybe it just hasn't come out yet. But the other thing that Zuru has in its back pocket is vertical integration. So they and I don't fully understand. I got a full disclaimer. I'm coming from the product development engineering side of things, so like I'm exposed to business stuff and keep up with things. But I'm also not. It's not my like area of core competency. But because I didn't think you could actually, as a to the extent that Zuru is incorporated or headquartered in New Zealand, but yet they have major presence or major. They're all over the world. I mean, they have they're huge showroom in LA but that their nerve center is really in Shenzhen, but like then they own their factories. But I didn't think, unless it was a joint venture with a Chinese company, I didn't think any foreign firm could own real capital or land or factories or anything like that. So don't ask me exactly how it works, but the story that's public that everyone knows is that they own the factory, design the factory, build the machines, buy the machines, train the employees, hire the employees. They're totally vertically integrated. They're like Standard Oil or something.
Yeah.
There's going to eventually be Zuru stores, and they'll have a drive-through, and you'll order X-Shot Blaster or something.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm curious to find out. Speaking of engineering, I'm curious to find out where in the chain that is happening.
I would love to know. My impression is that a lot of it is in New Zealand, Australia, and Shenzhen. And unfortunately, there isn't, a huge. I could maybe guess, but there's not a ton of people that are living in the United States and designing blasters that are, mass-produced things that sell at, mass-produced retail stores. It's Maybe there's like 100 people or something that can say that that's what they do. It ain't much.
Yeah.
Oh, just to answer, I double checked on it. The listing was actually put up by XShot's storefront on Walmart.com.
Oh, okay.
So it was XShot who put that up there and has that listing. So if anybody's going to get it right,
volume.
yeah, it's either a volume thing. It was fascinating though when knowing what you were saying earlier about that's how Walmart can kind of crush the price is because they're the ones who are actually importing it. But then seeing it this way,
they have levers on the product too. Walmart can help crush the price by like cutting features or you know. And sometimes Walmart can just cut the price by saying we're Walmart and make it cheaper.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
No. It's just fascinating. I was really shocked, and I think that was a big concern was when we saw the price. A lot of people were really worried about the product's quality, because obviously even some of the Chinese variants, these Chinese companies that have these AEBs, they're usually retrofitting gel ball to a Nerf blaster, so sometimes the gearboxes aren't really set up for it, or
that's kind of what my guess is for what's under the hood is that a beefed up, sized up action from their gel line is what my guess is about what's inside. I mean, one of the other things that Zuru does that is difficult or I guess impossible for other businesses is because they are vertically integrated and they are diversified. They can be very, very, very aggressively competitive in particular categories when they want to be. So, I mean, they sell dog food and makeup. And so if they want to come after a category of product, if they want to make, hairbrushes or something, they can lose money for 5 years on hairbrushes and crush everyone else around them. And, the dog food is keeping the lights on.
The loss leader setup.
Because they are vertically integrated, they can do things like they can pay the required profit margin to pay back the factory. But they can basically not see a profit, if they desire, if they so want, they could, at the level of the brand or the organization above it, they can kind of just do things for cost or maybe even decide to lose money. So it's much harder for a company like Hasbro to do that.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, they are diversified, so they can play a little bit of a game where like, okay, we're going to lose money the first, but it's really difficult to do because part of the thing with diversity is that, well, let's come out with this new line of toys. It might be a total flop, but we'll use the My Little Pony money or something. But why do that when you can say just screw that? Let's do something else that will make its own money.
Yeah.
Zuru's very intensely. They're the only company I think that actually keeps Hasbro up at night, and they're an intense competitor. And there's some wild stories about them.
I just realized, and I looked it up. Zuru is still a private company. It's not publicly traded either.
Yeah.
So
Zuru
that's
is
another
still
interesting.
Private.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're owned
interesting.
by two twin brothers, and I guess their sister.
Yeah.
And those guys are a little crazy. I mean, they literally took like 10 grand and went to Hong Kong and slept in the bushes by the airport and ate McDonald's every day and just did whatever they had to do to try to build a toy company, and it worked.
Yeah.
It's a really wild story.
Yeah.
I really briefly, I also want to ask you specifically from the perspective of being an engineer and having to deal with the external pressures on designing new products over the course of your career. The current financial climate is pretty questionable, and I'm curious what effect you would expect to see on the final product, on design, and on blasters coming out of companies based on the pressures that we're starting to see on some of these companies.
Vis-a-vis the trade war.
Yeah.
Good question. Like we need a second podcast.
I know. Well, I'm asking you to answer this question in like 5 minutes.
I can't
at the most.
I can't think of positive consequences short term.
Yeah.
There might be some positive consequences long term. But man, is a chaos. Chaos rules right now. It's a very unusual time in history. I mean, well, in a certain sense, it's not. But it's we were living in a lull for a while, maybe. But I guess based on what I know, which is limited, and I keep up with the news in China, and there's like when I shower in the morning, I listen to these podcasts and things about what's going on in terms of economics and industry and so on. But probably nothing good. Toys moved to China relatively early. Early 90s was when Hasbro was out there. And my boss, my former boss at Creative Engineering, has some wild stories about like going to China in like 92 or 3 or 4 and doing the first toy that Hasbro did in China. And this is before China is in the World Trade Organization or has most favored nation or most favored trading partner status. And so it was it was really the Wild West. Short term, I think toys are in a bad position. The writing's kind of been on the wall for a while. It shouldn't surprise anyone, although the speed at which it's happening right now is kind of breakneck. But Hasbro for 5+ years, I think, has had a commitment to. They were, I think, 90% plus of their products were being made in China, and they made a public commitment to get that below 50, I think, by 2025 or something. I don't know how they're doing on that. But I guess it's going to hurt, and I think you can expect, based on what I know, this is just a guess, prediction, but I think you're going to see shortages, price increases, but I just think you're going to see a lack of availability. It's going to hurt the toy manufacturers, and they're going to have to, a big company like Hasbro, it's going to hurt a lot, but they might be in a better position than, say, a company like Dart Zone might be screwed as a Chinese company with American sales and marketing. Hasbro, if they're close to that 15% figure, they might be able to shift things to India or Mexico, or they do have, one of the things you can look at, I'm sure you guys look at stuff like this when you research them, they have an approved vendors list, and part of their like reporting for, human rights and ESG and, environmental stuff, they often publish their lists of vendors, and you can see what countries they're in and where they are and the addresses and everything. And, they do have companies factories in, Vietnam and India and all over the world now. So they might be able to pivot a lot better than, say, Dart Zone. I'm not sure what Busby's going to do because they are, also kind of tied directly to China. And then Zuru. I mean, Zuru is, the vertical integration, everything is great, and they built an impressive organization, but they have the eggs in the one basket problem.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Zuru's interesting too, because one of the things we've always noticed about them is that their international market penetration is much greater than pretty much anyone else. Like their products are always popping up in countries that we don't think about day to day as United States citizens. So maybe that helps them, but at the same time, I'm sure the U.S. is such a significant portion.
It's massive.
Such a massive percentage of their market.
I don't have current stats, but when we were getting royalty reports, a little bit more than half of all of the Nerf business was from the U.S., and they lumped Canada in as well. So U.S. and Canada, U.S. and Canada were considered North America. Somehow Mexico wasn't.
Right.
So U.S. and Canada was like slightly more than half of all the Nerf revenue, and then the rest of the world was that 48%. So the U.S. is probably the majority.
Right.
Although maybe that's not the same. Maybe that's not true anymore.
Well, and part of what I think people need to understand is, I know that when we talk about international trade, people think about, I buy Blaster, it gets shipped from China. But if you are making a product like that, you're thinking about if I'm sourcing these parts, those parts originally come from one place and they have to go one place. And so much of international trade is companies shipping things to themselves and maybe sending parts from one place and I mean, I know a lot of stuff comes
really
fully assembled.
Complicated,
But it's really more than just I buy Blaster and it come on boat.
It's a lot more, and it's what you're talking about is globalism, right? Maybe hyper-globalism is the better. We've had globalism for 80, 70 years, and but we've probably only had what you want to call hyper-globalism for maybe 20-ish, 25-ish. And it's wild. And one of the things that, and it's kind of like the writing's been on the wall for a long time, and it's a very long discussion about all the ins and outs, but what I would say to someone who doesn't want to hear the minutia of where the screws come from, where the metal comes from, and the companies that make the grease and the silicone and the intermediate chemical products to make the plastics and all this stuff, is that if COVID did a bunch of things, but one of the things that it exposed is that we had built a hell of a complicated global trade system, and it was so complicated it's susceptible to to disruption. It's things have grown so complex that maybe it's not so good anymore. It's not so controllable or so predictable, and that simplifying supply chains, or maybe went a little too crazy with the the network of or the complexity of what we're doing. I mean, I think someone told me that there's actually 9,000, or maybe it was 7,000, but it was something like that, supply chain steps in building an iPhone. And it involves over 100 countries.
Well, it's so abstracted. You can't, one person can't control the whole. It's funny because it's to the degree that even if you think about, we were talking about hobby blasters, how much simpler that is, except not actually, because if you design a hobby flywheeler, which motors did you design it for? Which companies manufacture those motors? How many options are there to go through that? If you're going to put a parts kit together, you have to work with X number of companies from all these different places. I'm sure Out of Darts is having a hell of a time right now, because it's yeah, sure, they put their kits together in the United States in their place, but they have to get the motors from somewhere, and they have to get spring stock from somewhere, and they have to get all these things.
Trace that back to the barrel of oil or the iron ore that came from someplace, and it's really complicated. And it might be too complicated.
3D printing filament. 3D printing filament is a whole other thing for us.
Absolutely, and it's the system might have grown too complex for its own good, and that COVID exposed maybe we've made life a little too complicated. So I mean, and it's nothing I'm not saying anything too awfully controversial. Is the concept of making supply chains shorter and bringing certain functions closer to the market, basically where the product's being sold. So there's all these buzzwords like nearshoring or friendshoring, and a lot of this has been in the air since COVID, because that was just so painful and showed some of the flaws in the system. I think we just worked ourselves into a little bit too complicated of a global system, and although what's happening now is happening very fast and very abruptly, and but on the other hand, it's kind of well, damn, the writing's been on the wall in many cases for 5 years.
Well, and COVID was such a warning. COVID was such a warning shot, and if we didn't take the message, I mean, it's like global warming. We've known for so long, and what have we done about it? Nothing. Here's COVID coming and telling us, "Hey, you're
kicking the can, aren't we?"
Your supply lines are messed up, and everyone's like, "Nah," but we like it this way.
Ultimately, what happens when you kick the can is that eventually hell comes to pay, and maybe that's what's happened. Not that you have to like it, or that it's and whether it's good or bad doesn't matter. It's just that now is the time that the shit gets real. Shit hits the fan.
Well, yeah. On that pleasant note.
Oh God.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking with us about it. It's honestly so great because we get to hear from you all the time on the Discord and get your insights on stuff, but to actually sit down and chat with you about this stuff and sort of bounce back and forth.
No, it was fun. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much.
No, it was
this
great.
Was very pleasant.
This is actually we're right on schedule for the longer end of how our podcasts run, and I think people are really going to enjoy hearing all these details. And I think it's so important for people to get a better sense of the other side of because it. On some level, the business side of this is how this particular hobby started, right? People made homemades, and that stuff is really important to understand, but a lot of that was based on the work that went into the original Nerf blasters and things that there's a weird interplay, I think, between the corporate side and the hobby side in this particular hobby that some hobbies don't have. So it's really great to get that perspective.
Yeah, and I actually think that the business influencing the hobby, we're at an inflection point where I think some of the aspects of the business do have to be rethought, and I think that's why we're seeing the hobby have greater influence on the business now. Is that the tension between a novelty and a non-durable toy you throw out in 6 months versus something that is now more durable, that has common parts, that has a life cycle where the product's sold for 3 or 4 years. It's more a sporting good and less of a cheap toy that's an impulse buy.
There's a relationship there that
has to be dealt with now, I think, whereas before it was coming more from the toy perspective. I think that some of the products need to be rethought, and the supply chain and the design and all of it from a different more hobby focused or hobby aimed perspective.
Well, there's a relationship there that allows competitive nerfing to happen and allows this kind of growth. Anyway,
Hooray!
anything that you would like, anywhere you'd like people to check out the work that you're doing? Probably not, other than your LinkedIn, maybe.
I didn't plug anything. I didn't. I don't know.
Well, people can go to Out of Darts and buy a Tryon for $60. I was just checking; they still have the red ones left on clearance.
Double drum. It works. It's pretty happy.
Nice.
But this'll be free when it's done.
Nice. Oh, that's exciting. Okay. Oh, well, actually, so that's one thing, right? Is you have a printables page.
Oh yeah. For anyone that has a Tryon that wants to upgrade it, or there's a whole story. If you ever invite me back on the podcast, you can tell some of the other stories. But some people have some issues with the trigger, which we saw very few returns. But I think a lot of that was maybe because people were too shy about returning it. And but the printables page not only has upgrades and extra doodads, some really cool stuff actually, but it also has basically replacement parts that I'm sort of shocked work, because I would have thought they would have been injection molded. Like this guy here actually has some of the trigger mechanism reprinted in FDM, and it's, man, this guy is just happy all day.
That's cool.
So if someone's having trigger issues or catch issues or whatever, check out the printables page, and also the upgrades and the doodads, and then also complain at me if you really have a problem. I can often walk people through debugging.
You're not going to get support like that from Zuru. This company doesn't even exist anymore, and you can still get help. Crazy stuff.
Yeah, from beyond the grave.
Well, anyway, so we'll link to all that stuff in the description. Grim and Vile, what you got to say?
I'm streaming probably, and I'll mention it next podcast, because I'm actually leaving the country for a few weeks.
That's right.
Again,
we'll be
yeah.
adapting. We'll be adapting.
Actually, I might be able to visit Klein. We'll see. I'm still trying to see if we have some time. Hopefully, I can get over there. But I'm just throwing it out there right now. Hopefully, we'll see. Hopefully
for
timing.
Look forward to. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Grim,
so
you got
check
anything?
that out.
Nothing in particular. If I ever
Sick.
do, that'll be neat.
I am writing a song every day this month. I am posting them on my other YouTube channel, Kinetic Turtle on YouTube. I will link to that in the description as well, because why not? I haven't been posting every single one of them in the Discord like I have in the past, but nobody's watching them this time, which is kind of nice. Like, I'm just putting I shouldn't say nobody. You know who's watching them? Bill, CR Nerf. Love you, man. So great. He's in there every single time, and it's just my new slogan for the hobby is be more like Bill. Just if you're trying to deal with a situation in the hobby and you're not sure how to handle it, what would CR Nerf do? That's my new shtick. So anyway, yes. And with that, I need to eat something and go to bed. So thanks again, Chris.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, listeners. We'll be back in 1 week because we did this one in a weird part of the schedule, and we will see you then. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.